Right, good morning again, everybody. So I'm going to be talking about the Thetford Forest Open Habitats project, which has been developed to create a network of widened forest drives that connect with existing heathland priority habitat sites and with the Breckland Farmers Wildlife Network in the surrounding landscape. A concern for heritage was built in at the development stage of this project, and the results of an archaeological survey were instrumental in deciding the final design of the widened drive network, with the aim of avoiding archaeological features in the main. The survey has resulted in an enhanced heritage dataset, which will inform our woodland management and provide opportunities for research and public engagement. I'm representing the project manager, Naomi Smith, and the archaeological contractor, David Robertson, who's somewhere in here, I think, in this talk today, as well as myself. So at 18,730 hectares, Thetford Forest is the largest lowland pine forest in Britain, with over 2,000 species of conservation interest, 72 of which are only or mostly found in Breckland. The forest was created as a response to the shortfall in homegrown timber experienced after the First World War, with land acquired by the newly created Forestry Commission from 1922 onwards across the north of Suffolk Brecks. Thetford Forest forms part of the Breckland Forest Site of Special Scientific Interest, SSSI, designated for rare vascular plants, invertebrates, ground-nesting birds such as nightjar and woodlark, geological features and red squirrel, a few examples of which you can see here. Many of these protected and nationally rare species covered by the SSSI designation and other priority REC species are dependent on open habitats within the forest, including open heath, clear-felled areas, open margins and grassland along the edges of rides. While large-scale tree planting fundamentally changed the landscape of the Brecks, a rich variety of archaeological sites were preserved within it, including Bronze Age barrows, the unique medieval and post-medieval warrening architecture of the Brecklands, consisting of extensive perimeter banks and warreners' lodges, the remains of a flint mining industry which spans the Neolithic to the early 20th century, deserted settlements, and the remains of 19th and 20th century military training sites. So there are two main drivers for the creation of open habitat permanent open habitat within Thetford Forest. Oops, just losing my notes here. So the first is the target and commitment of improving SSSI condition in the UK government's Environmental Improvement Plan of 2023, that 75% of SSSI should be in a favourable condition by 2042. Across Forestry England's estate, 38% of protected sites are currently in favourable condition, but the Breckland Forest SSSI is unfavourable covering condition. So improving the quality and quantity of open habitat within Thetford will support SSSI populations and help achieve favourable condition. So the second driver for permanent habitat creation is related to our Forest Resilience Programme and the provisions of the UK Forestry Standards. Under the UK Forestry Standard that we currently work to, which is the 4th edition, soon to be replaced later in the year, 10% of the forest area should be managed as open space. In Thetford Forest, this 10% area is currently made up of a combination of permanent open space and temporary open space created by clear felling. We want to increase the proportion of permanent open habitat so that this can be managed specifically for SSSI species. As we increase the proportion of permanent open habitat, this also gives us the flexibility to trial different forest management systems other than clear fell. This is particularly important as clear felling areas on particular soil types is becoming increasingly unsustainable in the context of extreme weather and increasing pest and disease pressure. The Thetford Forest Resilience Programme will identify the optimal combination of different forest management systems to ensure that we can continue to meet our objectives for biodiversity and carbon sequestration. So to outline our rationale, we compared the favourability of using larger heathland blocks, our previous approach, and creating a network of widened rides. The 2010 Breckland Biodiversity Audit and other studies have stressed the importance of the existence using the existing forest ride system for priority plant and invertebrate species. And our conclusion came out that a network of widened forest rides to build on existing ride habitat with connections to priority sites is the best configuration of open space. We carried out various wide widening trials, for example, the Shifting Sands project in King's Forest in the southern part of Thetford Forest, which has demonstrated success for SSSI species and have also increased numbers of nesting woodlark pairs. We worked with an external consultant, Rob Hawks, to create models of the optimum network, providing the connections between the ride network and existing priority sites. Rob previously worked on the Breckland Farmers Wildlife Network, where the aim was to create disturbed arable margins for biodiversity. The two networks will link up, creating landscape-scale connectivity. Rob produced 3 models initially for us, incorporating heritage data in their development, a limited, a moderate, and an extensive network. And of those, we're aiming to deliver the moderate network option, 375 hectares of widened ride network, and an additional 40 hectares open habitat blocks for nightjar. This equates to an increase in permanent open habitat in Thetford from 7 to 9.5%, in addition to temporary open space that will be created by cyclic clearfell. I'm pressing the wrong thing. Hold on. So what will the rides look like in time? These 2 slides give a sense of what the transition will look like between the existing situation and in 10 years' time. The existing trackway will be widened to approximately 40 metres by harvesting trees back from the ride, creating scalloped edges and hollows on alternating sides of the ride. The 40 metres is based on maximising isolation for plants and when surrounding areas are at full maturity. So after felling, we'll remove as much brash, that's sort of like loose bits of branches and so on, from the site as possible, and grind stumps down to below ground level, then scrape back the top layer of organic soil on the widened ride area and leave an undisturbed grass verge next to the existing trackway. The grass verge edges are going to be forage harvested, with alternate sides being cut each year, and the newly created widened area will be disked across approximately a third of that area each year in a random pattern to create a successional mosaic of bare ground and short-term turf habitat. An example of disking can be seen on the left-hand side. You can see those Krysia crossing patterns, and that's what we're aiming to do. And this is an example of an existing wide along Fire Road 207, which was created during the Shifting Sands project in King's West in Thetford Forest. While heritage data was used in the creation of the overall model of the Open Habitats Network, in order to refine the choice of the preferred side of the ride, we commissioned David Robertson of Archaeology East Anglia to undertake an archaeological survey, which was carried out between February 2023 and March 2024. Initially, David carried out a desk-based assessment of the heritage features within a 40-metre buffer of the Open Habitats Ride Network, using data including that held in Forestry England GIS, an example of which is on the right there. Everything brown is our heritage features, so it's quite packed, and also data from Norfolk and Suffolk HERs. A preferred right side shapefile was produced at the end of the desk-based assessment by David, which was loaded into field maps together with the survey's heritage dataset for use in visual survey and field. Heritage features within the visual survey areas were checked in the field. Comments on their condition and interpretation and management recommendations were made in each case. Areas of potential archaeological sensitivity were also identified that would be within the widened ride network, with a recommendation for archaeological monitoring to be carried out during the ground disturbance phase. By the end of the archaeological survey, a considerable number of new archaeological features have been identified, and many existing records have been enhanced. Some of the figures are given here, with the headline that 64% of the 1,858 records in the Project Heritage database were newly identified features. Also, David walked more than 525 miles, which is pretty impressive. Some of the results of the survey are shown here. There's a parish boundary marker stone on the left there between Cranage and Mumford parishes. Oh, is that my 2 minutes? Probable military structure in Mildenhall, a surface find of a piece of carved stone encountered in Croxton parish, and the remains of Broomhill cottages, which has been identified by the Breckland Society as the probable location of the Warren Lodge associated with Broomhill Warren. And David also identified this site as having potential for public engagement, further interpretation building on previous work by volunteer groups researching the Breckland Warrens. 2 more examples of the kind of diverse sites that were recorded here. A war memorial on the left dedicated to the crew of a Lancaster bomber which crashed in this location in March 1945. And on the right, a forest workers' hut, which gives an example of how we can record our own heritage as working practices have changed over time. So I'm now incorporating the survey data into Forester, or Forestry England GIS, so that it's now available for the rest of the organisation to consult and can be used during the harvesting operations associated with the Open Habitats Network creation. David also helped inform the harvesting operation by marking heritage features using our established method of marking discrete or linear features using white spray paint, which you can see in the 2 images on the left there. I've used the data compiling my advice during our operational site assessment process for the harvesting programme, where I input advice alongside my other colleagues from conservation, recreation, civil engineering and so on. Another beneficial outcome of this project has been in the example of this scheduled barrow in Lynn Road Covert on the right here in Mumford Block, adjacent to the Ride network. The harvesting team are going to be able to fell some of the trees around the barrow, widening its open area, which will help towards our management objectives for scheduled monuments under UKFS and as agreed in our management plan with Historic England. So next steps are going to be the commissioning of an archaeological contractor to carry out monitoring and survey during the ground disturbance on areas of potential archaeological sensitivity identified by David during the survey. And just to conclude, the Open Habitats Network will have benefits for biodiversity and for this significant flora and fauna associated with the Breckland Forest SSSI. We now have an enriched record in all the areas covered by the survey, which are going to help inform woodland management and, by their dissemination to the Norfolk and Suffolk HERs, make them available for research to a wider audience. I'll end it there.